What's going on, everybody? It's Achilles LBT coming at you with a brand new video, and in today's video I will be revisiting for the third time, I believe, my current Sonya build, because it's something that I've been tampering with for a while now, and I actually came across something that worked a lot better than I thought it would, and it actually involved me going back to certain talent picks that I previously saw no need for, and I had a change of heart when I used them in certain spots instead, and actually got some very surprising results. And it's actually part of the reason I was actually able to complete that little personal goal I had, the one that I mentioned back in my 500th upload, where I wanted to get Sonya to level 20, which I was actually able to do last week. So I was pretty psyched about that. And it's just a build that I want to share. And the other thing that I want to mention in this video is that, as far as the monk goes, I'm actually gonna wait until next week when he goes officially live, because the only means I have to really get the monk is my gold, and I still have enough gold to buy him. The thing is that they mentioned in the patch notes, which is something else I will cover in this video briefly as far as Sonya goes, but it's something that they mentioned in the patch notes, is that if you unlock the monk with real money, it would transfer over to next week when the patch goes live. They made no such mention, as far as I know, about if you use gold to unlock him. And factoring in that my stim pack has only 5 more days, I'm not going to be able to get back 15,000 gold in that amount of time, just in case something goes wrong. So I think I'm playing it safe. I think I'll be better off just waiting it out till next week. You know, better to wait just less than a week, because now it's not even a full week. It's easier to just wait and just do it then and do the videos that I want to do. I have been seeing the gameplay on them though, and I've been like very psyched about what I've been seeing. So that'll be something for next week. But getting into this character and this build, just want to briefly run through her abilities one more time, just in case anybody's new to the channel. And there's also something there are things that unexpectedly are changing with this hero. Honestly, I thought with the talent changes they had mentioned in the patch notes, I thought really the only thing that was going to change was superiority and how it worked. I didn't realize that they were looking to actually tune her up overall, and it was actually kind of surprising to see Sonya's name on the list, because granted, I don't think she is a flawless character. She's my favorite character by far, but I don't think she's a flawless character by any stretch. I didn't really see the need to change anything, really. I thought that a lot of the problems with Sonya laid more with the people that were playing as her rather than the hero itself. But going into her Q, one more time, try and make this brief. Q is her Ancient Spear, which is a skill shot that basically, if you land this skill shot, it does 100 damage, and it gives you 40 Fury right off the rip. Fury being her trait, she does not run on mana. One of the advantages, I still maintain, one of the biggest advantages to this hero is that she doesn't run on mana, so there's never any need. If your health situation is good, there's really never any need to recall because you're out of mana. You can just use the Ancient Spear and get your Fury back in that way. Again, it's a skill shot though, so you have to be fairly accurate with it. And another thing, you can't be shy with this thing. You definitely can't be shy. Like, if you're a first-time user with this hero, this is definitely, because it also has a brief stun on it if you do land it. And like, the mistake I made when I first used this hero, I don't think I covered this in any of the other videos I did with Sonya, but the mistake I made with this ability was that I thought it was used for the opposite purpose, because I didn't notice that it gave you Fury. So I thought this was an ability you would use to catch people trying to run away. So I wouldn't actually queue this up until people were running away from me, and then I would try to land the spear to try and catch them, to stop them and secure the kill. Granted, you can still do that, but you're not supposed to. That's not supposed to be the sole focus of the Ancient Spear. You definitely want to use this to initiate. Even if you don't land it on the hero, landing it on minions is a good way to get better with it, just to get used to the timing and whatnot. And any noise in the background, I apologize for in advance. They're doing heavy construction right now outside, downstairs, so if any of that bleeds through onto the audio, I apologize for that in advance. Moving on to her Seismic Slam, I've always maintained that the difference between a good Sonya user and a bad Sonya user is one that sees the value of the W ability as opposed to the value in the E ability. And the Seismic Slam is still, to this day, her Juggernaut ability, in my opinion, or actually, I think it's fact. I don't even think it's opinion. It's a fact that this is her Juggernaut ability, and it's really the thing that sets her apart from a lot of the damage dealers. Mainly that it does 100 damage from the onset on the target enemy. It's not a skill shot. All you gotta do is queue it up. You gotta target somebody, and it just lands every single time, pending that they're actually still standing there in front of you. But the Fury cost is not that high. The cooldown is the biggest thing. The damage is high, and the cooldown is near non-existent. You're supposed to keep spamming this over and over and over and over again. And a good Sonya user is aware of this. Like, this is basically the ability that gets people running away, that gets everybody running away, because this is not something that just works on like squishy targets like assassins or a specialist. Like, you could actually burst down other tanks with this ability, and that element is something that I don't think other Sonya users have really caught on to, because I've done it a number of times to like really tanked up versions of Johanna or even Muradin. Like, the only thing Muradin can really do to stop it, if he's stupid enough to stand in front of you, is throw his little stun, and that's it. And with this build that I'm actually going to go into now, even the stun won't be as bad. It's like you're still going to get stunned. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing that can stop a stun on Sonya, but your health is going to be in a better place. And that's the other thing that they're actually patching with Sonya. They're actually giving her a little bit more health to quote unquote make her a little more tanky. I don't actually think that it's gonna I don't think it's gonna achieve the desired effect, in all honesty. And they're only lifting it by 20 points. She starts off with 930 health points when you first jump into a game. They're raising it up to 950. Granted, the amount of health she gains per level is also going to be increased by, I think, like 10 or something along those lines. I don't remember off the top of my head, so you can feel free to correct me on that. But basically, she starts off with 20 more health points, and her health increase per level is also increasing. But in my opinion, if you want to put her on par with, and I'm going to say that this is a double-sided statement before I say this, because I understand the downside to what I'm about to say, and I will get into that immediately after I finish this sentence. But in my opinion, if you want to make her on par with other tanks, because clearly the changes they're making kind of throw the whole assassin thing out of the window. My other video that I mentioned where they might change, where there was a rumor that they were going to change her classification, that's gone now, because now they're patching her to be more tanky, which means that they're happy with her being where she is. They want her to stay as a melee warrior. They want her to stay as a quote-unquote tank, even though she's not really a tank. She's just listed as a melee warrior. And they feel like, Blizzard feels like, upping her health is what will help her become more of a tank, which on one hand I do agree with. But if you want to put her on par with other tanks, and anybody who's familiar with Muradin or Johanna or any of the high level tanks, they all start off with at least 1,000 health points, and Sonya's at a disadvantage starting off at 930. Again, as of this recording, this upcoming Tuesday, it'll be buffed up to 950, which is all right, you know, it's something, but it's still not on par with other tanks. Now, the downside, because I did say that was a double-sided statement, is that if you give her 1,000 health points, essentially she gets the benefits of all of the other tanks, at least health-wise, but still keeping the benefit of her damage that not every other tank has in the game. There are, in my opinion, unless this is the route they're going with Artanis, when they do release him after Rexar, there is really no other melee warrior I could think of that has the raw damage output that Sonya does just off of her basic abilities. Can you build other heroes to be more of a damage type of hero than her? Of course. But just off of her base abilities and like what she brings to the table, I can't think of any other hero that's really up there with her, like as far as raw damage output. Especially like, well, mainly because of the seismic slam and the 1 second cooldown. You can't really put out as much damage with another tank on a full bar of mana that you can with Sonya on a full bar of Fury. It's just not happening. So the other thing that they changed, moving into her E ability, and this is really the only reason I'm going over the abilities again, besides the fact if new people are watching this video who didn't see my old videos. But Whirlwind is the other ability that's actually being changed, because I don't know, because they're nerfing it on one hand, but then they're buffing it on the other. Because basically what they're doing, and just to go over the ability, it deals 175 damage to nearby enemies over 3 seconds and heals for 25% of the damage dealt. Healing is doubled versus heroes. Now, To kind of reiterate before I go into what they're changing, the difference, what I said earlier, the difference between good Sonya users and bad Sonya users are ones that focus on their W and not on their E. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to jump into games with other heroes and see people using Sonya and go into team fights or whatever and start using their E. Like they use her like she's a conventional hero, where every hero basically has, like, every damage dealer has some kind of variation of an ability combo where you just go 1, 2, 3 and then like it does the damage for you. And that's not how you're supposed to use Sonya. Sonya is not meant to be a 1, 2, 3 hero, if you want to call it that. She was never built to be a 1, 2, 3 hero. And a lot of people go into these team fights or these fights against other heroes and they try to land their spear, they slam one time, and then they do the whirlwind and wonder why nothing's happening, wonder why they're getting their asses kicked. You see guys talking about the hero is nerfed or the hero is no good. No, it's not the hero at all. It's you. You don't know how to use the hero. That's not what you're supposed to do. And the thing that makes it just as dumb that people try this is that whereas Seismic Slam only has a 25 point hit to your Fury, Whirlwind takes away 40 points of Fury from you when you use this. And it's like, and it has a larger cooldown. Like, there's no part of these two abilities that would make you believe that Whirlwind is better. The only thing that might make you say, well, maybe it is that the healing is doubled versus heroes. But this is the thing. Even the healing isn't scaled to be that effective. When you really, really, really look at it, when you really pay attention, you can't spin on a high damage output hero and just let them like burst away at you and survive. You're not going to survive that with just one spin. It ain't happening. And then on top of that, you're sacrificing your Fury on an ability that's not doing any damage and that doesn't really heal you all that well, and you're just a sitting target. Like, you're just there, and people wonder why they keep losing. Now, to get into what they're nerfing first, because this is, I guess, the thing that they wanted to elaborate on. And I think it's cool that Blizzard actually knows what kind of hero they have with Sonya, because the way they talk about this character whenever they address things, because I've seen them address other people's complaints about the hero needing more damage, and then they flat out said what I say, like they're just not using the hero right, and they flat out put the entire sequence of buttons you should be pressing, and like 4 or 5 times they put the W in there. There was almost no mention of the whirlwind, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Even Blizzard is aware of this. So on the flip side, with everything you're hearing me saying, well, you might be thinking, well, then what the hell is the point of using Whirlwind if the healing is not that great and the damage is not that great? I'll tell you, Whirlwind is extremely good against minions and against, like, getting some of your health back while you're farming or whatever, or when you're laning and you're soaking XP. Whirlwind does a very good job of cutting down the minion numbers and whatnot and still giving you some sustain in things of that nature. So, and Whirlwind's other usabilities, other things that make it handy, are things you can add through the talent builds and whatnot. But that's another thing completely. So, getting into what they're nerfing, they're actually saying that they want the ability to turn into an ability that people use against heroes more than minions, because they felt like the way the ability was supposed to be used, it made Sonya a pain in the ass to deal with. If you didn't have a stun ability, if you didn't have a way to take her out of her whirlwind, she was basically a lane bully, which, to be fair, that's exactly accurate, because that's what I did. I would definitely queue up my whirlwind, even if there was a hero around. If I wasn't afraid of them being able to burst me down, I would queue up my whirlwind with them standing right there, but never hit them. Like, at the most, I tap them once or twice and just make them back up a little bit, make them think it's going to be bad, but then go right back to spinning on the minions and cutting their numbers down, which in turn pushes people back. So Blizzard obviously was well aware of this. So one thing they did do was they're going to nerf the 25%, the healing for 25% of your damage. They're nerfing it slightly to 20%, and they're actually they're buffing the healing doubled versus heroes. They're buffing it to tripled now. So how do I feel about this? I feel like this is going to encourage more bad play, to be brutally honest, because I may try it once just to see if the healing is viable, but if I see that it's not, if it's still not, because I thought doubled wasn't viable. So if tripled is still not viable, which, to be brutally honest, I would not be surprised if it's still not viable. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying, if it's still not viable, then it's just going to encourage bad play, further bad play that players are already exhibiting with this hero. And it could just ultimately be a bad look. And maybe, I think the idea is good, that getting people to use it more away from minions and giving them incentive to actually use it towards heroes, because I do think the whirlwind would be a lot better if it actually did something to heroes, which it currently doesn't, and I'm not so sure that this buff is going to change that, but that's just my personal opinion. I could be absolutely wrong. Moving on to her traits, Fury. Fury basically generates, like I said, this is what she has. This is her resource ability, if you will. She does not run off of mana, so she generates this by dealing or taking damage, and the other upside is that she gains movement speed whenever she uses a basic ability. So, really the only downside about Fury isn't even, like, on the Fury trait itself. It's on the players that are not aware of that movement increase speed, because there's countless times where I'm aware that I can move faster than somebody just because I use an ability and I get blocked by a teammate, like most notably in Uther, trying to land a stun, and instead of getting the fuck out of the way and letting the movement speed player run by and do its job, they end up blocking, trying to land a stun, which never ultimately happens, and the stun really won't do much anyway, so I just don't understand. And that's not me hating on Uther, because I think it's a good hero, but I just think like a lot of the way people use the Uther character, whenever you have a player trying to use Uther like a tank instead of a healer, it just spells bad news. And that's just my personal opinion off of a lot of what I've seen. So moving along into heroics, I'm only going to cover this again because I noticed a little while back, I think I've seen a few times that people are still like kind of questioning like the viability of Leap versus Wrath of the Berserker, and this is just another opportunity to kind of shut that notion down, because Leap is not having anything changed about it whatsoever. Neither is Wrath of the Berserker, for that matter. So my opinion on why one is way better than the other still stands, but I'm just going to reiterate it for anybody who hasn't seen the old videos. Now, Leap essentially lets you leap into the air, dealing 50 damage to nearby enemies and stunning them for 1.5 seconds. Now, you would think that the fact that you can jump anywhere within reason, because they do let you target where you're going to land, so you can be fairly accurate with this ability, you would think, well, you jump in and do damage, and you stun somebody for almost 2 seconds. How is that bad? Well, the cooldown, for one, is 70 seconds, which, if you have a 70-second ability, or a 70-second cooldown on an ability, you damn sure needed to do more than 50 damage. Like, that's strike two, I guess, with this ability, is the damage output. It's only 50 damage when you land this. The Seismic Slam, by comparison, when you start the game, is twice as strong as that, with a 1-second cooldown. This is half of that at level 10 with a 70-second cooldown. Like, is this really starting to sink in yet? Like, why this is a terrible heroic? And then the last part, which is really the biggest upside that people see to using this ability, other than having escapability as an heroic, because that's the other plus to having Leap, is that you could jump out of bad situations. But do you really want to waste a heroic on escapability when you can just use your talent build to give you escapability? And my answer to that question is no. Fuck no, you don't want to do that. That's a complete waste. Now, 1.5 second stun is not bad on a regular talent or a regular ability. On a heroic with 70 seconds of cooldown, it is horrendous. Muradin can do this shit in his sleep with damn near anything you can do with him. You could even talent build for his basic attacks to stun people. Basic attacks, not basic abilities, basic attacks. And they have Sonya with a heroic, like her ultimate, that stuns people for 1.5. This is not even close when you factor in Wrath of the Berserker, which has, unlike this with the 70-second cooldown, has a 45-second cooldown, and it increases all damage dealt by 40%, and it reduces the duration of silences, stuns, slows, roots, and polymorphs against you. It cuts it in half. And the last 15 seconds, this is one of the biggest appeals to this, is that it lasts 15 seconds and extends by 1 second for every 10 Fury gain. So I'm going to use the same example that I did when I first covered this, in which if you queue this up and you have 15 seconds on the clock, essentially every time you land Ancient Spear while you're in, well, what I've grown to call Super Saiyan mode, basically, because that's what, if you need a picture painted for what Wrath of the Berserker does, it basically puts Sonya into Super Saiyan mode, and that's the best way to put it. So if you go into Super Saiyan mode and you land a spear, you immediately extend your duration of Super Saiyan mode by 4 seconds, which is nuts. And the best thing about this, the absolute best thing about this, isn't even that it cuts down all forms of CC except for stuns. It cuts it in half. The best part is that the cooldown initiates as soon as you initiate the ability altogether. So all that time that you're adding to your ability, the cooldown is rapidly going down. And again, 70 seconds to 45 is a non-comparison. And in the late game, if you want another example of why this is so much better, in the late game, your respawns start going from 50 seconds to 60 seconds and upward. So that means that every time you spawn, you'll have your Wrath of the Berserker, your Super Saiyan mode on deck every time you spawn, which is insane. Like, there is no comparison in the damage output you get. Preferably with this build that I'm about to get into, especially once you hit level 17, because that's the change that's gonna be going down in this build, as opposed to other builds that I've done. And I know, like, people that have played this game like, well, 17 is not a talent build. No, it's not. What you pick at 16 is just part 1. At 17, you really start to see it kick in, and that's when it becomes like no holds barred with the damage. So, factoring everything in, it's not even a competition at all between Leap and Wrath of the Berserker. If you want to have the damage output with this character, which is absolutely paramount to making her viable, you need to go Wrath of the Berserker. There is no way in hell. I've even seen, to be fair, it's not just bad players that debate this sometimes. Sometimes somebody like Hengist will debate this. Well, I've seen him play against an Illidan before, and actually, like, kind of weigh in, like, oh, should I use Leap instead to kind of get away from him, whatever. And I'm sitting there like, what kind of question is that when Illy can basically be killed by a strong wind, and Hengist doesn't suck with Sonya at all. He's nasty with this hero. And I'm just sitting there like, well, why would you ever need to run away from Illidan? Like, she can burst him down in her sleep. So, again, there's no comparison between the two. If you're really trying to get your damage game on point with this hero, Wrath of the Berserker is the way to go 100% of the time. Now, going into the base build, a talent build for the DPS or whatever, again, I actually think, like, I think block, for one, is something that kind of promotes building her as a tank. And the thing that changed with this build from, like, anybody that's seen my old videos is that I was a mixture of damage with very, very, very few defensive talents picked. And that's not necessarily what's changed. What's changed is that essentially I used the first half of this build to build up her sustain and a little bit of defense, but then the second half is purely geared towards offense. And striking that middle ground that way has given my version of the Sonya hero an extreme amount of viability. I've been winning a lot more games with her as of late, ever since I changed to this build. And it's not even just with support tanks on the team. Like, I could actually win games with just her alone being the lone tank. It actually works with this new build. So there's really no other option that gives you the same thing that gives you, like, its worth in value the way Warpaint does. Like, Warpaint is something that you notice the entire game from start to finish. And if you've seen any of my other builds, I'm huge on talents that are basically viable from start to finish. I don't like picking talents that you kind of don't notice anymore, like level 1 talents that you stop noticing after, like, level 10. Like, I don't favor them, and a lot of heroes have talents that you really just stop noticing and stop paying attention to. Warpaint is not one of those abilities. You always notice it, and it just gets better as your damage gets better. So, again, block only stops basic attacks, and it cuts it off. It cuts the basic attack damage in half. It doesn't do anything about abilities being used on you. And with the Sonya character, people know that she's not the tankiest character as it is, so they're not going to be stupid enough to run up in close range where she can do damage. They're going to be spamming you with abilities, and block does nothing to reduce damage from abilities, which immediately, in my opinion, wipes its viability off for this build, or any build for that matter. You do not want to go block. Endless Fury is one that, especially with this new build, and when you see what I changed, there's no way on paper that having 200 Fury instead of 100 Fury is a bad thing. The problem with Endless Fury is that I feel like it's a great talent that's put in the wrong spot. Like, I don't think there's any way you could chance picking Endless Fury over Warpaint. You need some kind of way to heal, and that's the biggest thing with Sonya, is that she can go from alive to dead in no time, depending on who she's fighting or her positioning, her situation. And you need to have as many outs to keep your health in check as you can if there are no healers around you. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the healers, they pay more attention to the other heroes. When you have a Sonya character out there, they pay a lot more attention to her, to other heroes, that like a Kael'thas or a Jaina, because they know that their damage output is so high, and all they assume about Sonya is that she's not a tank. So there's really, when they factor that in, they don't see the worth in keeping her alive, and you have to make up for that on your own with things that you could build through the talents, which is exactly what I've changed with this build. It's exactly why this build works. So again, there's really no other option that's better than Warpaint at level 1. So, you know, don't mess with it. Shot of Fury is another one that's actually getting changed, because apparently when you queued it up on a mount, it would demount you, and that's something that they're actually patching, so where you can queue it up on a mount and you don't have to worry about like being on foot, basically. Like, you'll stay on your mount regardless. And the biggest thing with Shot of Fury, because if I don't see people picking Warpaint, this is usually the talent I see people picking, and it already spells bad news, because yes, you can activate this every 45 seconds to gain 50 Fury, but why would you waste a talent that gives you 50 off the bat? If you're accurate with the Ancient Spirit, it'll give you 10 less, and the cooldown is only 13 seconds. It actually has damage to it and a stun. There's just no real reason to use Shot of Fury when you can just get that same amount of Fury virtually off of a basic ability and just keep on moving. And when you factor in Warpaint on top of that, there's just really no discussion. Now, level 4 is really the interesting talent now, because I feel like level 4 was actually the part of the old build that was very underrated. People would see what I would pick and they would make fun of it, or they just don't see the value of it, because what I would pick when I first started out, I picked Shattered Ground, but I realized that the splash damage behind isn't really that big of a deal, so I moved away from that and started using Superiority, because in theory, Sonya is always going to be easy for a hero to kind of burst down, but what you don't want is for it to also be easy for non-heroic players. And that was the whole idea behind Superiority. And the other thing with Superiority was I was forced to change my build, because at that point in the game when I changed it and I was using Sonya, there was a lot of emphasis being put towards the jungling aspect of this game and like hitting camps and stuff like that. And before, I didn't have any real out to take camps with Sonya. Her Warpaint is not going to be good enough, especially in the late game, to just go and run and take camps like no problem. Yes, she'll be getting health back, but those camps are a lot stronger than you realize. So this is where it gets a little interesting, because not just one talent on this list is getting changed, but another talent is getting changed on this list. And I'm going to go over Superiority first, where Superiority basically is getting merged with Mercenary Lord. People don't know, but for people that don't know, Mercenary Lord basically, it makes any, I believe it makes any mercenaries around you hit 50% harder. Like, their damage output is 50% higher if you're standing close to them. So it wasn't really, I could see why that talent wasn't getting picked, and I see why they wanted to merge it with something else to keep it in the game. But like, if it was just that, I would still say that Superiority would clear-cut be the way to go. But the thing that I really loved about Superiority was that it didn't only reduce damage from minions and mercenaries, but it also made you tanky against structures. And again, with Sonya, Superiority allows you, it gives you a bigger out to go into hero versus hero skirmishes at like 80% or higher. Where if you didn't have Superiority, you would run the risk, depending on your timing, of going into those same fights at 60% health or lower, and Superiority wipes that out all by itself. So that immediately, in my mind, kept it viable, and only a player that really doesn't have an open mind has a hard time actually seeing that, in my personal opinion. But the thing that they're nerfing about Superiority, because they're technically it's being buffed in the sense that they're adding a whole nother talent to merge with it. Apologize for the horns outside. they're actually taking away the structure damage. Like, so superiority is no longer going to cut your structure damage in half. Structures will be able to do full damage on Sonya no matter what now, and that kind of changes things for me, because that was like the fact that structures couldn't harm my build. Like, it let me be ballsy around turrets and like kind of charge at them a little bit. If I hadn't let like the minions down, I could like get a few slams on a turret, let it waste some shots on me, and then back away like no problem. Now that they're taking that out, that's not an option anymore. And the other one that they're changing is focused attack, which they're actually addressing the exact complaint that I had about this ability, which is the only reason I always said that it wasn't really viable for me, because I love that it gives you 75% additional damage every 10 seconds. The problem was that you had no control over this. Like, it was absolutely no control over when you got that damage boost. So the patch that's coming out on Tuesday that's available right now in the PTR is that they're actually removing that element, and the damage bonus will only be used against other heroes. It will no longer be used against minions, forts, structures, bosses, whatever you want to call them. Now it'll only be used against heroes, which directly addresses my biggest complaint with the ability. So I actually think focus attack is going to be an extremely good talent to use now. Like, a lot of people felt like it already was. I didn't personally, because you didn't have any control, and I didn't like that. Now this actually puts the control back in your favor. So I kind of have a change of heart about it now. Remember, I said at the start of this that the first half was tailored towards defense, and if superiority doesn't give you defense towards structures anymore, I mean, technically I could still use it. I would just have to be careful around structures, which wouldn't be the end of the world. But now, like, I'm looking at the buff they made to focus attack now, like, as a viable option. But again, like, you want to keep the first half about defense. So the other one, I would say, basically, your two options should be between focus attack and hurricane. If you don't want to run with superiority, then hurricane and focus attack should be your other two options. And the way you would decide between this is actually by looking at your enemy team's composition. If they have 4 or 5 players that have some form of crowd control, I would definitely say that hurricane is the way you want to go. But if they only have like 2 players, or maybe even 3, maybe you can get away with 3, then do whatever you want. Like, I wouldn't advise going Shattered Ground anymore, because again, the splash damage from behind, you don't want to use Seismic Slam to take care of minions. You want to use your spin to take care of minions. Even with what they said about the healing, they're not changing the damage, so the damage is still going to be good for minions. So you don't want to waste your slams on minions. So that's why I say the splash is really not going to be a factor. So basically, if they only have two characters that can really crowd control you in a hardcore way, then go for focus attack, because that extra damage isn't going to hurt. But in my opinion, I'm still going to go superiority, I guess, at the end of the day. I won't change that. I'll probably just make the adjustment on my end and be a little more careful around structures and whatnot. So I'll probably still go superiority. Again, it guarantees, or it ups your chances of going into skirmishes with 80% health or higher, and you need to have that kind of health on deck, because Sonya can be bursted down kind of easy. Even with the health changes they're making, she's still going to be easy to burst down, and that's something you want to account for with this level 4 talent. Moving on to level 7, this is the other major one that I changed, because before I used to go follow through. Again, I was using follow through in June before everybody thought it was cool this month or last month. I was using this way before everybody thought that this would be a good talent for Sonya, and to be fair, it is still a good talent, but I got a little bit creative as far as like looking into active talents and stuff like that. And when I really started looking at what ferocious healing, because I'll be the first to admit that whenever I saw this talent, I immediately shot it down. I saw no viability for it whatsoever. But then I really started paying attention to like what it can do, and actually experimented with it and tried it out, and I actually found after like 5 or 6 games that I was really liking it. And it's actually the way that I go now with this build. Again, the first half is about defense and sustain, and this is the biggest one that kind of flips a trigger for your character. Once you hit level 7, then essentially you take a lot of pressure off of your healers, because the cooldown is only 10 seconds. That is virtually nothing. The thing that you got to watch though is that you have to have Fury on deck in order to use this. You can't just heal whenever you want. You got to have at least 20 Fury, and it heals for 10% of your maximum health. Is that a lot of healing? No, it's not a lot of healing, but it's enough that it makes the enemy hero have to burst you down one more time. If that makes it easier to like give you a gauge of how much healing you get with this, they have to burst you down one extra time with this. And sometimes the amount of health it gives you is actually what keeps you alive. I can't even stress how many games I survived surefire death situations while running away just because I had enough fury to queue this up. And again, it's only a 10-second cooldown. That is nothing. That is absolutely nothing. So this is the big change that I made to the build that it's really paid off, and it's really like led to less dying and like more staying alive, more damage. Everything is being based off of this. So before, where superiority was kind of like the mastermind behind the build, now it's actually ferocious healing, and this is something that I would definitely advise anybody watching this video, this very long video, to give a try. So level 10, again, I already went over that, so we're going to skip that. Level 13, I still go mystical spear. I do not change that because you want to be able to fire your spears off more often. And again, this is where you start to take a turn. It starts paying more attention towards offense. If there's a lot of sound in the background, a lot of feedback from outside, I apologize for that. Again, there's a lot of construction going on outside. So again, one upside to this is that you can fire the spear off more often because it reduces the 13-second cooldown down to 9 seconds. But the other upside is that it pulls you to your location wherever you throw the spear, even if you don't hit an enemy. So this is your escapability right here. Remember I said you don't want to use leap for this because it's a 70-second cooldown just for like one jump. But at level 13, every 9 seconds you have a means to get away. So it's a complete difference. Level 16, I was going with no escape because I wanted to maintain how much burst I had. But not so much burst, but I wanted to maintain how often I was able to spam W's. That was the change that I made because initially I ran Furious Blow. I went over to no escape, and I started noticing after a while that yes, while I was able to use the Seismic Slam a lot more often, it wasn't really, the damage output wasn't really like working for me. So I actually ended up going back to Furious Blow. And again, level 16 is when you get this, yes, but you don't start getting into orange tier damage till level 17, which is what I mentioned earlier about this build becoming a bit of a game changer once you hit level 17. Because once you hit level 17, then she gets the Chaos effect where everybody has to be aware of where she is. And you only need 2 slams. You really only, I thought it was a bad thing that you could only slam twice really before having to like refill. But then I started paying attention to the damage output, and you only really need 2 slams, and people get the fuck out of dodge, and like you have more than enough time to try and get your fury back to do it again. This becomes such a critical, viable talent. Like I cannot overstress how much the damage output has improved once I went back to Furious Blow. So you definitely want to stay with Furious Blow. If you're going for damage, you definitely want to go Furious Blow. And at level 17, you will start to see tremendous results. And finally, at level 20 again, I don't believe, with most heroes, I don't believe in using the level 20 talent to increase their heroic if the heroic is just fine on its own, which I feel like Wrath of the Berserkers, the Super Saiyan mode is just fine if you don't touch it. Once you get it to level 10, it'll do the rest for you. You don't need to fuck with it. So you want to put the icing on the cake with this build. As always, with Nexus Blades, it ups your damage, your basic attack damage by 20%, which means it's also upping your healing a little bit. And it adds a slow every time you land a hit. I don't exactly know how much it slows people, and honestly, I don't notice it slow, but the 20% more damage is what I love about this. So you definitely want to cap it off. Again, just to give a recap of the build, 1 through 7 is all defense and sustain, basically. 10 is your heroic that boosts your first offensive ability that boosts your offense, and then everything from there forth is all about offense. So basically the first half is all about defense and sustain, the second half is about your damage output, and you'll be able to take so much damage with this build that you won't really be missing anything in the first half if you don't take focus attack at level 4. But again, that's completely up to you, because with the new change they're making on Tuesday, I think focus attack is going to be so awesome to pick on whoever has it, including Sonya. So again, level 1, you want to go Warpaint for sustain. Level 4, open for choice. You're flexible here, but I personally will still be going superiority. Again, I'm not too happy that structures will be able to do full damage on you, but it's an adjustment that I can make on my own, so I will still be staying with superiority. And again, superiority guarantees, or not guarantees, but it gives you a higher probability of going into skirmishes at 80% health or higher. Level 7, the change I made was ferocious healing. Again, there's only a 10-second cooldown, so essentially, as long as you have Fury, every 10 seconds you can do a little burst heal to yourself without any help from a support player or anything like that. This keeps you alive a lot better than you would think it does, and it's just the onus is really on you to kind of spam this whenever you have the opening to. Level 10, you go Wrath of the Berserker. Your Super Saiyan mode with a smaller cooldown is way more effective than a jump with a small stun and a huge cooldown. Level 13, you go Mystical Spear to fire the spears off more often and give yourself escapability by pulling yourself to wherever you throw the spear. Just a bunch of positives, a bunch of upsides to your Q. And again, if you're bad with the skill shot, this will actually give you more of an opportunity to practice and get better with it. Level 16, you go Furious Blow. This is basically her Kael'thas change, if you will. It adds more damage to your Seismic Slam, which is your moneymaker ability to begin with. Yes, the Fury total is higher, but the burst once you hit level 17 with this ability is so high that all you will need to make a dent in a player is 2 bursts, and then you're good to go. It will be noticeable on any hero, tank or not. And finally, at level 20, you want to finish it out with Nexus Blades to add that much more damage to your basic attacks. Trust me, the 3.0 is viable anywhere, like Quick Match, Hero League. This build will work. It's something that I hope you try out. Sorry for making this video go for a lot longer than I was planning to. I actually hate when I make these long videos, but sometimes I give long-winded responses when it comes to these kind of things. So part 2 of this video, because I will be showcasing what this can do. Part 2 will be showcasing this. Won't be anywhere near as many details. The Sonya Assassin video is over 700 views, which I feel like is crazy. And again, I'm thankful for all the support. As always, it's Achilles LBT. That's Achilles with the Z. Remember it.